Hello, my name is Professor Dawn Brooker. I'm from the Association for Dementia Studies at the University of Worcester. I'm really delighted to offer this PowerPoint presentation talking about some of the basic principles in person-centred dementia care. The first person to have described person-centredness in relation to people living with dementia was the late Professor Tom Kitwood, who led the Bradford Dementia Group at University of Bradford. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, he started to develop very strong theories around why it was so important that we appreciated the emotional and psychological needs and the personhood of people living with dementia. In doing this, he was drawing on earlier work by Martin Buber and Carl Rogers. He developed these series of papers and theories into a seminal text called Dementia Reconsidered that was published in 1997. And although that's now 20 years ago, some of the things that he described within that text have remained the backbone of modern person-centred dementia care. Specifically, he looked at the enriched model of dementia rather than a standard medical model, and he also talked about the importance of supporting personhood for those living with dementia, and specifically to look at how those in a caring role could do that through the eradication of malignant social psychology and the promotion of positive person work. More of that later. So let's look at how Kitwood described personhood. He said that personhood is a standing or status that is bestowed on one human being by others in the context of relationship and social being. It implies recognition, respect and trust. And that's very important, I think, to differentiate person-centred care from individualised care. When we're talking about maintaining a sense of personhood, inherent in that is that personhood occurs in the context of relationship. And it's that specifically that we're looking at when we're trying to provide person-centred care. Person-centred care are all of those processes by which we can help to maintain the personhood of those who have dementia. This diagram here comes specifically from that 1997 book from Kitwood, where he said, you know, we have changed our language now, where we will talk about the person with dementia or the person living with dementia. But although the language sometimes changes, what we hear very often is that the dementia word is writ large, and that the person is sometimes hidden behind that diagnostic label. And if we're moving towards a more person-centred perspective, we should be seeing the person first and recognising that the dementia is part of their life and sometimes a really important part of their life, but actually their core personhood is what is important. And although this is 20 years ago now that these, or 20, 30 years ago that these terms first started to be used, I think there is a core fear in dementia, which is about that I will stop being me. There is something around dementia that creates that panic and distress that somehow the person that I am will no longer be there. And one of the things that has really changed in those last 30, 20 odd years is the role and the voice of people who are actually living with dementia. When Kitwood first started writing, it wasn't very common for people with dementia to speak out in their own right. And I really like this quote here from a lady called Christine Bryden. Christine Bryden is an Australian writer and advocate, and she was diagnosed with dementia at the age of 46. And she wrote a really good series of books with her husband, variously called things like Dancing with Dementia. And this is a quote from her 2005 book. And this is her advice to caregivers. So what she says is, how you relate to us has a big impact on the course of the disease. You can restore our personhood and give us a sense of being needed and valued. There is a Zulu saying that is very true. A person is a person through others. Give us reassurance, hugs, support, and a meaning in life. So I think what we've had over the years since Kitwood first started writing is a much more of an evidence base and a practice base, that how we support personhood is really important, and that's important in the earlier stages of dementia and becomes increasingly important as people's cognitive capacity becomes more impaired. So what I've put up now is what Kitwood described as the enriched model of dementia, and he broke it down into this simple equation. So the D stands for the experience of dementia, and he says that all of these 5 issues will have a real impact on how people experience the dementia. So the most straightforward one to think about is neurological impairment, so the type and the degree and the subgroup of the type of dementia that people have got, the specific cognitive challenges they face, is, we know, determined to a large part where that damage has occurred in the brain. So the type of neurological impairment is important in the experience of dementia. But we also know that people's general physical health is really important, keeping people feeling fit and healthy, making sure that people have their glasses, their hearing aid, that they're free from infection, that they're free from pain. All of those things have an impact on how the dementia is experienced. Thirdly, he talked about the importance of biography, of life story, of recognising that we cope with what our current challenges are with reference to things that have happened to us at different times in our life. And that's particularly true in dementia, in Alzheimer's type dementia, where the remote past will often seem much more relevant than the very recent past. So people may make sense of where they currently are by reference to those well-stored memories. The 4th factor that he talked about was personality type. For some people with some types of personality, it's much more difficult for them to adjust to not feeling in control or to letting other people care for them or make decisions, whereas for other people that is easier and more straightforward. And finally, he talked about the importance of what he called social psychology. So that is how the person experiences the social and psychological care that they are being given. And I'm going to talk about that a bit more in the next few slides. But this enriched model of dementia has been written about a lot now, we can add different things into it, and some people have looked at the importance, for example, of the physical environment or the sensory environment. But that idea that dementia is more than just the impact of neurological impairment is really important. And it's by understanding the neurological impairment, by understanding the person's life story and their personality, if we get to know that about a person, and then we ensure that we optimise their health, that we make sure that they're feeling fit and healthy, and also that we optimise the sort of social and psychological support they get, we can really start to help people live well with dementia, that we can make an impact on something that sometimes can feel very helpless and hopeless. Now, the words that Kitwood used, again, are going back 20, 30 years, but this way of looking at dementia in a multi-faceted way, I think, we talk about holistic care, and we talk about the enriched model of dementia, and some of the terminology may have changed here, but a lot of those sort of core ways of thinking about dementia really go back to Kitwood. So instead of neurological impairment, we might, in modern terms, talk about cognitive strengths and needs. Rather than talking about biography, we might be talking about life story. Personality, pretty much the same. Instead of health, we might be talking about physical fitness. And instead of social psychology, we might be talking about positive and compassionate communication. Another key factor that Kitwood developed was this idea of psychological needs in dementia. And although this now seems fairly straightforward, when I first started working in the dementia care field 30 odd years ago, we wouldn't have dreamt of thinking that people with dementia, particularly those with more advanced dementia, had any real psychological needs. So at the time this was really quite radical. And again, it's one of those things that we may have different words for and different concepts for. But again, this idea that central need for love, for knowing that you are important and cared for, we know now maintains well within dementia, that people at all stages of their life and their life course, at a very basic level, need to know that they are loved. This diagram is sometimes known as Kitwood's flower, because he used this diagram within his book and said that if love was at the centre of the flower, but there were these 5 psychological needs that were often eradicated or overlooked in dementia, particularly as people entered later stages. So he identified the need for comfort and care, that people needed to have help in maintaining their identity and their sense of self, that they needed to feel attached to others and to where they lived, that they needed a sense of occupation and agency, and that they needed to feel included in life. So these needs, if we're thinking about how we provide our care, central to our care is ensuring that these needs are met. And we know that people living with dementia have particular disabilities around communication. But as the communication gets more difficult, the need to feel close to others, it increases. And so that's often at the crux of where we're trying to provide that person-centred care in order to maintain personhood. And Kitwood, in his writing, talked particularly about these 2 terms. He talked about the malignant social psychology that blocks well-being, and he talked about positive person work that makes well-being happen. And I'm going to look at those in these next couple of slides. So, malignant social psychology. When Kitwood first started writing about the need for person-centred care, from his observations, particularly on hospital wards and in care homes, what he saw was that there were a number of things that happened to people on a regular day in, day out basis that he theorised would block personhood and well-being. So he talked about people being intimidated, being when care was withheld, when people were calling out and nobody was answering. He talks about outpacing, when people needed help but it was being given in too rushed a way. So he identified these 17 ways in which the social psychology of an organisation became malignant. Now, it's really important to say that he wasn't saying that staff or professionals did malignant social psychology with a malicious intent. Rather, this way of interacting with a person with dementia becomes interwoven in the culture of care. So if a new care worker starts and she learns on her first morning working in a care home that it's okay to chat about what she did the night before, what she watched on telly with her co-worker over the head of somebody living with dementia in that home, then that becomes an accepted way of working. The new care worker's not doing that because she's cruel or malicious. She's doing it rather because she sees somebody else do that and therefore thinks that is the norm. But if we were observing that care from the position of the person living with dementia, that would be an example of ignoring and possibly of objectification. So the malignancy in social psychology is more that if that sense of your identity and inclusion is being overwhelmed because of your dementia, if you're talked about or talked over 50 or 60 times a day, that has an impact on how you feel about yourself as a person. It detracts from your personhood. So the malignancy is that it eats away at personhood, and also that it spreads very quickly from one member of staff to another member of staff. So that's malignant social psychology. So what Kitwood said, if we want to make our social psychology better, is we need to decrease any examples of malignant social psychology, and we have to put in its place positive person work. So these are ways of communicating with warmth, at a relaxed pace, with respect, with celebration, with acceptance, with collaboration and enabling, giving people a sense of being included, of belonging, having fun, and that there is genuineness and validation in our interactions. So that's the social psychology. It's the shift from the malignant social psychology into positive person work. And there's another quote here from Christine Bryden, again from her 2005 book. And what she says is, as we become more emotional and less cognitive, it's the way that you talk to us, not what you say, that we will remember. We know the feeling, but we don't know the plot. It's your smile, your laugh, and your touch are what we will connect with. Empathy heals. Just love us as we are. We're still here in emotion and spirit, if only you could find us. So we've known about these sorts of theories for a long time, and my own work in trying to take some of Kitwood's sophisticated ideas forwards has been around trying to make those ideas more concrete and more practicable in everyday situations. And so I developed the V.I.P.S analogy for person-centred care, that says if we're defining care fit for V.I.P.s, we need to be providing care that values people, that respects individual needs, that takes the perspective of the person with dementia as the starting point, and that provides that supportive social psychology. And I wrote the original text, Person-Centred Dementia Care, back in 2007, and last year in 2016 myself and Isabel Latham published the second edition of our book on person-centred care. And also I would say, you know, that book has been translated now into 10 different languages, including Japanese here. This is the Japanese text. And I think at its heart that person-centred care speaks to our human experience, and it transcends cultures. The V.I.P.'s definition of person-centred care was used within the UK Nice Sky Dementia Guidelines, and person-centred care was defined thus: that it values and promotes the rights of the person, that it provides individualised care according to needs, it understands care from the perspective of the person with dementia, and it provides a social environment that enables the person to remain in relationship. Now you can use those guiding principles as everyday principles for guiding your own work with dementia. So whether you are running a care home, whether you're bandaging a leg, whether you're giving a psychological assessment, whether you're running an advice service, you know, these are the 4 questions to ask yourself. Do my actions show that I respect, value and honour this person? Am I treating this person as a unique individual? Am I making a serious attempt to see my actions from the perspective of the person that I'm trying to help? And how might my actions be being interpreted by them? And do my actions help this person to feel socially confident and that they're not alone? So that's how you use those V.I.P.'s guiding principles on an individual basis. But also I'm particularly interested in how organisations like care homes and hospitals and domiciliary care organisations, how they help to support personhood for the people with dementia that they're caring for. And so when we're looking for how we improve the quality of person-centred care, I ask organisations to try and assess what they're doing according to these 4 principles. And different principles require leadership at different levels of the organisation. So particularly for issues that show how much we value people or how much we support individual lives, those things really require leadership for those responsible for leading the organisation and for setting the standards and procedures. For issues to do with personal perspectives and providing that immediate socially supportive environment, that requires leadership for those responsible for the day-to-day management and delivery of care. And it's how we bring all of that together which makes an organisation person-centred or not. And within the V.I.P.S framework, we've developed these 24 indicators of things that we would expect to see within an organisation that was claiming to be person-centred. And within the book and within other publications, what we've done is to give people a way of assessing themselves as an organisation across all of these different indicators. Now, I've covered a lot there. You don't have to read the book to get a better idea of the care fit for V.I.P.s. There is also a free website. You have to register to use it, but once you're in, it's entirely free, and there's no adverts or anything to catch you out. But that, if you're interested in looking at this framework further, that will take you through the different indicators, how to assess how well you're doing, but also lots of different tools and resources that you can click on to get further information about any of those indicators. So I hope you found that useful. I've covered a lot within this short PowerPoint, and thank you from all of us at the Association for Dementia Studies, University of Worcester.